huge amount of efficiency out of their better weapons, particularly in combat.
Yeah, I think combat's where it really shines. You can really buff the heck out of Death Guard bolters if you want to, but you can't get around the fact that their AP dash, maybe AP 1 in very particular circumstances, damage 1.
Yeah.
So if I think they can shoot through halls really well, but they do still have that sort of, they lack that sort of big Hellblaster-esque squad where you could point at a unit of Marines and delete them.
Yeah.
But they're still nice to have, and if something like Orcs or GC Lacult ever come back, then their shooting is still something to be worried about for units like that.
Yeah, definitely.
Like that. So going on to the units. So first up, you have to pick one Lord of the Death Guard. So you've got the choice between the Demon Prince, Typhus, the regular Chaos Lords, one on foot, the one on Terminator armor, the Lord of Virulence, who's the new chap, and a Lord of Contagion.
Well, I don't think you have to take one.
Oh, sorry, you can take a maximum of one.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think you always would take one because they're all of them have a case for them. I think what I like is there's not an outstanding choice. There's not one where that invalidates the others. I think the Demon Prince, the Lord of Virulence, and the Lord of Contagion are probably the best ones.
Yeah, I don't think you're going to bother with a Death Guard Chaos Lord, because to give him weapons that are comparable to a Lord of Contagion, you're basically spending the same amount of points. Yeah. I mean, he doesn't have some of the other bits and pieces that the Lord of Contagion has, like the extended contagion range. So
yeah, if you want to go just pure cheapest, you could have the Chaos Lord without Terminator armor. I don't think there's probably never an argument for the Terminator armor one when the Virulence and the Contagion exist.
Yeah.
Typhus has the advantage that he's not company locked, which is nice, even though he's got some of the keywords that may think he's company locked.
Well, yeah, and the other thing with Typhus is he's a psyker.
Yes.
So,
and a pretty solid one as well.
Well, exactly. Cast 2, knows 2. So, I mean, if you sort of decided that, yes, you didn't want to run a battalion, you wanted to run a patrol with Mortarion, but actually you suddenly did need a bit of support in the old psychic realms. Well, Typhus does both the job of a Lord of Contagion and a Playcaster, minus the Pestilent Fallout, which is neither here nor there. So yeah, I think if you only wanted to run one HQ and you needed him to do everything, you're probably going to take Typhus.
Yeah. The Demon Prince got access to 2 damage through weapons and no longer has -1 in attack rolls when they use it, at the slight cost of not being able to reroll ones by themselves anymore.
No, he does have more base attacks.
Yeah, so they got better in some ways, they got worse in some others. I think they're still a perfectly good choice, especially to get some damage 3 into the army. And you can make them still really tough to kill, or you can give them like the reroll everything relic and make them very choppy. Yeah, they're still very solid.
But then I'm not sure their damage out. Say you've got one with a sword, and so that makes him strength 8, AP -3, damage 3. I don't know what the damage output on that is versus a Lord of Contagion with the reroll hits and wounds relic. Even though he's -1 to hit, I think he's going to do pretty much just as much damage.
You can take reroll hits and wounds on the Prince as well.
You can, yeah, to be fair.
But he is a bit more expensive.
With the sword, 30 points more than a Lord of Contagion, and unless you're giving him the separating plate, his armor and his in-run are both worse.
I've tried out the Lord of Virulence on Tabletop Simulator. I never realised how much I really liked having an HQ with a pretty reasonable ranged weapon. So it's a 2d6 heavy flamer that's a plague weapon. And he's got a pretty respectable aura as well, where you can make Plague Company core units attacking with a Plague weapon. If you roll a 6, you get an extra AP of 1. Whew, that's a few hoops to jump through.
That's the thing. It's a nice idea, but it is so limited. What's that going to affect? A couple of Blight, 2-shot Blight launchers, maybe the odd Plague sprayer. I don't. Yeah.
You can make the bolters Plague weapons, and you can do it with all your melee weapons as well. So if you want your HU to be a little bit more supporty, but also be able to get into a fight,
Well,
I think he's...
No, because it's ranged attacks only.
Oh yes, sorry, my mistake. But I think just the Flamer and the Power Fist are pretty decent reasons to pick him.
He's also on the same size base as Typhus. He's on a 50 mil.
I was not aware of that.
Weirdly.
I was going to order them, but they were out of stock by the time I got there.
Yeah, I've got mine. He's been built.
And then finally, you've got the Lord of Contagion, who's much more appealing than he was previously.
Yes.
And has the option for a pretty nasty grenade, actually, if you want to take it.
Yeah, so I think they've done that because there was a sort of easy to build box that had 3 Blight Lord Terminators and a Lord of Contagion in it. Felfius' Tainted Cohort, and in that he's got a Man Reaper and he's holding up an orb in one hand. I think they've done that loadout specifically for that model, and then the model that was in Dark Imperium, so the 8th Ed starter box, is the Plague Reaper dude. So I've actually ordered one of those off of eBay, so I have the option of which loadout to go for. I think the orb's cute. Would you pay 5 points extra for it? Maybe. I don't know, but again, because that Plague Reaper is then damage 3, I think that's cool. You can get a relic that isn't -1 to hit.
And if you want to, he does have, I believe, the correct keywords to have the overspill damage.
Yes,
which is very nice if you are taking the reduced attacks of the Plague Reaper.
Yeah, because that's the thing. The Man Reaper gives you more duality, which is the thing I love about Death Shroud, is the fact that going into 1 wound or 2 wound model units, they're going to be equally as efficient because they will be more or less elite depending on how many wounds they've got, right? So they have so many attacks, which is why I think, potentially either a relic or a pathogen is something you might consider on a Death Shroud champion, but probably not on any of the other champions, because he has as many attacks as a Lord of Contagion, and he hits as hard as a Lord of Contagion, basically.
Yeah. I think, as we said at the start, you can pick any of them and be happy with what you pick, and it's just a flavour to tasting, which I think shows very good design between the options. Finally, you have the option of a Sorcerator. A Sorcerer in Terminator armor. You can't take one without it anymore. Or a Plague Caster. I think you'll always have one of these in the list because of what we mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
Or very often have one of these in the list unless you're really trying to take a patrol. Both of them are good. Neither of them are exceptional, is how I view it.
Yeah, actually. I mean, that's the thing. One's got the potential for a few more mortal wounds. The other one's in Terminator armor. That's kind of the beginning and the end of their differences. So, you're probably not going to want your Malignant Plague Caster in anywhere near sort of danger zone. So, whereas the Sorcerer has got a bit more survivability,
and the option to deep strike.
Yeah, but I don't think. No.
Yeah, I don't think you want to, but it's a nice thing to have.
Yeah, absolutely.
So next up, we've got the Plague Marines with the biggest possible data sheet I think you can have.
Yeah, there's a lot going on there.
I think we kind of covered them earlier.
We did, yeah. I think you can build them cheap. You can build them really shooty, more shooty than you could before. You can build them really melee-y, if that is a word, more so than before. You can do kind of mix and match. I think depending on the list I'm running, depends on how many points I'd probably bother investing in them. I mean, the big change is really going from a 5-man to a 10-man versus going from a 5 to 20.
And the extra wound.
Well, yeah, I mean, so the extra wound, the extra attack, we've already discussed as being, excellent, particularly with the changes to disgustingly resilient. The fact you can't take a big blob of 20 of them, I don't know if is the worst thing in the world, because again, that was potentially a bit gimmicky, and especially with the sort of change to Cloud of Flies. I don't necessarily think you want a key unit like that you need to protect every turn, because again, they are slow. So I think you want to diversify where your assets are.
Yeah, agree completely. Cultists got a little bit of a kick in that they lose OBSEC and are not worth talking about anymore.
You are never running cultists in Death Guard. There is no point.
No. Poxwalker's got a buff though. So they did lose. Their Feel No Pain is now on a 6-up rather than a 5-up.
Yeah.
But they're still fearless. They got +1 toughness in build, and they've got access to a pretty good strat. I've taken these in all of the Death Guard lists I've run so far, either as 3 squads of 10 or just like 1 squad here and there to sit on an objective, and I've yet to be disappointed with them.
Yeah, they do what you want. They're the least threatening thing in your army, and therefore targeting in them doesn't necessarily sort of, unless they're sitting on an objective, you need to clear them off. You're having to dedicate resources to dealing with such a cheap throwaway unit. Because it's 50 points for 10.
Yep.
You're taking 20 of these for less than 5 Plague Marines.
Yeah, I actually think they outshine the Plague Marines in a lot of roles.
But then, as we've discussed, you have to have a unit of Plague Marines.
Yes, you can't just. Yeah. But yeah, they're really good. And the fact that they've got access to a Mortal Wound strat, which isn't capped as a maximum number, does mean, again, you might see a gimmick build with a bunch of Poxwalkers now, a couple of big squad Poxwalkers, just because they're a solid unit, even if they don't do anything all battle.
They're cheap bodies for sitting on objectives. They can't do actions, with the exception of the Plague Marine, Death Guard specific one. So that is a bit of a sort of net loss. But they are, and they're not core, so they're not going to be getting rerolls unless you're dropping strats on them. So they are very limited, but you only really need them to do a very limited role. So
yeah,
it's absolutely fine.
Yeah, they're not the star, but they're such a solid foundation, and they'll just be a pain for your opponent to get rid of in an efficient manner most of the time.
Yeah, absolutely. The other thing is their weapon skill is not now linked to the size of the unit, which is good. It's flat 4 up. It used to be 5, and then if they had more than 10 in the unit, I think it went to a 4.
If they change that with demons, that'll be very interesting, because they've got a lot of, if you have 20 or more, you get a bonus. 10 or more, I think. But that's
the changes to disgustingly resilient. I am super interested to see what happens with Plague Bearers, because they could be going the way of the Dodo.
Yeah, I'd be surprised if they get 5 up. But discussion for another day. So then we've got the bunch of Death Guard support characters. The Blightbringer we've kind of already covered. The Blight Spawn we've pretty much covered as well. He lost a damage on his Plague Sprayer, which is a bit of a shame. But I think his Fight Last aura combined with the relic is just amazing.
And also his strength is less swingy.
Yes. The Putrefier got an interesting change. He's no longer quite as good as just pumping out the grenades. But
he does still do that. Like, everyone who is within aura range still gets a buff to their grenades.
I just don't think that he'd be enough taking if it was that.
No.
He's relatively cheap. He's only 65 points. He's technically got a pistol, which will never shoot because it's only range 3. But at the start of either the charge or the fight phase, which I really like because you can have him close and have a unit move away, or have a unit move towards him, depending on where he is. Select a play company core unit within 6. If it has an unmodified melee attack wound roll of a 6, it does a mortal wound in addition to any other damage.
Yeah, so
really
basically Blades of Putrefaction was, but now you don't even need to cast it.
Yeah. I've always tried to have him as one of my characters. I've been a little disappointed with him, but the potential of that is such that I keep wanting to try him. Because that is in a meta where things like Terminators are becoming more and more popular, and where transhuman is a very popular stratagem. Having something that ignores both of those is just brilliant. And mortal wounds are always scary. Tallyman is pretty good as well. He won't do much damage ever, but he has pick a core unit within 6, and it essentially gets prescient, +1 to hit. And he will get you back a couple of CP over a game. Again, just a very solid support character.
Yeah, he's all right. I think I'm probably not as sold on him as you are, but I'm glad he has a range rather more befitting his terrible weapons loadout. Because before he was re-roll hit rolls like a chaplain, but you didn't want him anywhere near your front line. So yeah.
There's the Plague Surgeon, who's sadly for Death Guard players not as good as the Marine one. Although if he did have the same abilities as the Marine one, that would be horrendous with Death Guard.
That would be
even we'll say less horrendous than even more horrendous than the Marine one.
Well, yeah, I mean, you think it's bad enough a Marine army bringing back an Outrider every turn, bringing back a 50-point Death Round Terminator every turn.
Ooh. But yeah, he can heal up some infantry models, and he has a 6-up Feel No Pain aura within 3. If you're taking him, you're probably always taking the relic to give him a 6-up, range 6 Feel No Pain.
Yeah, Fugaris Helm.
And
then
next,
if you take that in, which play company is it? The play company that lets you add 6 inches to an aura range.
Ferryman.
Yeah, Ferryman. 12-inch Feel No Pain aura.
Yeah, when Death Guard are as hard to kill as they are, it's just frustrating every little bit of damage that you get through, then suddenly it gets stopped here and there. It's very frustrating. Yeah. And next up, you have what I think are the stars of the book, the two Terminators.
Yeah, I love the fact that these 2 pages are opposite each other in the book. So it's definitely my favourite section of it.
Both of them are great. Basically, the difference is, do you want a bit more long-range shooting and have some bolters? Would you rather have some more versatility in your attacks from the Death Shroud, or have some flamers? The Death Shroud are slightly more expensive. They're 50 points compared to 40 points. But I've ran both of them, and I haven't been disappointed in either of them.
No, they are awesome. The Blight Terminators don't have a lot of high damage attacks, but then need to do the Death Shroud. There's nothing in either of these units that's more than damage 2, but they have a decent number of attacks, particularly the Death Shroud. They have an insane number of attacks. 4 on your regular dude, 5 on the champion. And especially with their Man Reaper, if they're going into a horde, getting 2 attacks for each one of those, that's awesome.
Yeah, slight tangent, but when I played 30k, I played Death Guard then, and the first ever 40k event I went to, I ran Death Guard, and my list for that was essentially 30 Terminators and 3,000 points plus some other bits and bobs, and that was 10 Death Shroud and 20 Blight Lord, and I can't quite do that in a list in 40k, but I can get bloody close to it, and it's been good fun so far trying that.
Well, I think I mathed it out, didn't I? I think because you can have maximum of 30 Blight Lords and a maximum of 18 Death Shrouds, because they're units of max of 6. And actually, that is, I think it's 2,100 points. Just that many Terminators, which is very cool. But obviously, an illegal army. You've got no HQs or anything in there. I'm not sure how good it would be, but yeah, that's the Terminator wet dream.
You have a Hellbrute next, who's fine. I think actually he's got the best stratagem in the book, but he's got no weapons to use it. So he's got a +1 to hit and wound strat for 1 CP.
The shooting.
Yeah, if you could give him even a double twin heavy bolter, I would really try and get him in the list. But
you can give him a multi-melter with 2 shots and a missile launcher, but then that's 3 shots. You're getting what's that hit and wound on? Is that enough?
Yeah, yeah. He's almost there, but he's not there. Possessed, I was initially very down on, but the more I've thought about it, the more I like them. I'm not sure I like them more than Terminators, but because I like them mostly just for the fact that they have the most attacks. Well, they've got a lot of cheap attacks relatively for Death Guard, and if you combine that with the 6s become mortal wounds, I think you can still have a really nasty unit. And they are fast for Death Guard.
Well, that's the thing, aren't they? They've been spec'd. They're not just repackaged Chaos Space Marine possessed now. They've got the +1 toughness. They've got disgusting and resilient. They've got contagions. Their mutations of plague weapons. I think they're really cool. Not least of which, I'm still trying to work out how I'd convert some up. What bits and pieces I'd use. I think I just want that as a bit of a modelling project rather than anything else.
Yeah, I think their biggest issue is that they share is a very interesting comparison between them and the Terminators, and they're in the same slot as them. And although you can have a lot of elite options, even in a battalion, I think you want the Terminators more often than.
You're right.
They're certainly an option that if I saw them across from me on a table, I would be worried about, which I think is a good thing.
I think if you didn't run Mortarion, then you'd have the points to take some, if you weren't already taking some possessed and some bloat drones with flesh mowers for some quicker sort of early turn threat. I mean, it's only 2 inches more they get on the movement, I suppose, but every little helps.
Yeah. So if you fully buff them up, I think for a squad of 10, you could get about 8 mortal wounds out of them in addition to their other damage. Quick maths, which is pretty good, especially when you've got all their strength 5 of AP2, and they're going to get a bunch of wounds on things as well. Albeit that is a 400-point unit with a couple of characters buffing them for that. But yeah, potentially scary, but probably not as good as Terminators.
I don't think they're that much. They're 24 points each, so it's 240 for 10, I think.
Yeah.
I suppose you're factoring in all the support characters you've had to take just to make that work.
Yeah, so that's Tallyman +1 to hit, that's Putrefier, and you probably want a Chaos Lord in there for rerolls, once to wound.
Yeah.
And I think I still went high on them.
They've all got to keep up.
Yes. So you could teleport the Terminator Lord in or something, but the others are a bit harder.
Yeah.
Chaos Spawn, a little bit disappointed they didn't come with Discussing Resilience. You can add that for 1 or 2 CP. They're fine. Perfectly reasonable thing to add if you've got some points spare.
How much are they?
I don't think they got a points change. So they're either 21 or 23 points.
23.
Yeah. Perfectly happy to have them and sit on a back objective as well, or screen out some deep strikes or things, or even if you want to go big and have a unit of them and give them disgustingly resilient, that seems fine as well.
Not bad for 20 points, is it? That many wounds.
Yeah, they lack core, which is not surprising, but means a lot of the buffs won't work on them. So 2d3 attacks hitting on 4s, you're not going to be that accurate. Even when I was running these in pre-book times when they had d6 attacks, but you could buff them, and I would often put prescience and try and get something around from reroll ones. they tended to whiff more from than you'd expect. So, but yeah, solid option to have in the book, but not jumping out off the pages. Couple of demon engines next. Blight's haulers are solid. They're a nice source of heavy weapons, but I don't think they're actually that good. They got they got quite a points rise. Blight, Bloat drone, equipped for melee, I really like now.
Yeah.
Mostly because it has a 6-inch intervention strat, and I found with Death Guard, I really struggled to get to those mid objectives turn 1. The Bloat drone is fast enough to get there, and if there's a scout unit or something there, it can either try and charge it, or if the scout unit comes up to it, it can intervene into it. And it's just really awkward to kill. I don't think I'd ever want the plague splitters anymore, which is a shame. No. That's what all of mine have.
Well, ditto, and unfortunately, 2 of them are the kind of ones from Dark Imperium. So I think looking at my bits box, I've only got 1 flesh mower. So
I don't think you take a lot of these ever.
No,
but I think 1 or 2 just to jump on an objective at the start and then probably get shot off is going to do its job more often than not.
The one with the heavy blight launch is actually interesting because it's quite a lot of shots, but
it is also, the heavy blight launcher is a profile that Death Guard don't have, i.e. a reasonable number of multi-damage shots.
Yeah.
But I don't think it's good enough to really take just for that. Personally, at least.
No.
And finally, of the sort of Death Guard exclusive demon engines, there's the Plague Burst Crawler, which I think is fantastic. I didn't originally rate them as that because I got held up over discussing Resilient Change on them, which I think is technically enough to the crawler. But the entropy cannons got so much better, and the mortar got slightly better as well, and the fact that it got BS3. It is a very swingy model, but it can swing really hard now.
Yes. Yeah, that's the thing. And also, you're probably swinging from a slightly higher place, so
yeah,
the pendulum slightly
and again, Death Guard don't have that sort of particular ranged output, so just a couple of these to pop some rhinos and things and sit on a backfield objective, brilliant. I don't think anything else in the book does it as well as them.
How many elite slots do you get in a patrol detachment?
Patrol is 2, but you do actually get 6 in a battalion.
Yeah, that's the thing. I was wondering if it was 3 elite slots. I know you get 2 fast attack, 2 heavy support, but I couldn't remember how many elite slots it was.
Yeah, I've looked at patrols a couple of times to get Mortarian in this. Then you've got some filler pages, which have Land Raiders, Predators, Defilers, and Rhino. I feel a little bit of a shame because they don't get most of the new stuff. They don't get Disgustingly Resilience or any bonuses to toughness or anything like that. I feel they could have pushed the boat out a bit on these to make them interesting. Rhinos you might just want to take anyway because they carry Plague Marines around in. But I feel given how that none of these, apart from the Rhino, ever see play, I feel they could have given these something to make them a bit more interesting, and it's a shame they didn't.
Yeah, agreed. I don't think you're ever going to really see these.
No.
You're probably just as likely to see stuff from Forge World. I saw a Don Hoosen list on Goonhammer, and he'd stuck some Sakarans in there and all sorts of stuff. Real classic Don Hoosen list. But yeah, the Defiler's all right, but because he's now weapon skill, ballistic skill 3. But would you take him Death Guard versus taking him something else if you're building around Defilers? I'm not.
Yeah. And I think they share a pretty similar role with I think Plague Crawler does a reasonable amount of stuff as a Defiler. Obviously, the Defiler is much better in combat. But you've got a lot of stuff in Death Guard that is good and wants to be in combat. I don't think you need that Defiler. I think what you're looking for is ranged output. And none of these really have it at a price point you're looking for.
No. The Defiler, I mean, the Defiler's interesting. I suppose it's a cross between a Dreadnought and a Plague Burst Crawler, but with the survivability of neither. Because it's only T7 and it doesn't have Disgustingly Resilient or whatever it is that Hellbrutes now have that are it make them the same as their Imperium counterparts.
Yeah, it's if they'd made it T8, if they'd give it Disgustingly Resilient, I'd be much more up on them. Or even make it core. They do have the Smokescreen keyword, which means you can make the -1 to hit. That's not bad.
Yeah.
Maybe if you're really desperate for some multi-damage, a multi-damage unit that's good at respectable at ranged and combat, you might put one in. But I think that's a stretch.
You can give them they do kick out quite a lot of shots. Because you can give them a twin heavy bolter in addition to their Defiler cannon, and on top of that they've got a twin heavy flamer, and on top of that you can give them a comp.
Yeah. Again, the other thing is if they got a points drop in future, might be worth looking at. Until then, probably a skip.
Yeah.
So finishing up with two very different but quite interesting things. Should we leave Morty for the end?
Yeah.
So they've got the Miasmic Malignifier, which is really cool for a terrain piece. I don't think it's quite good enough still, but it's something I do want to try, and I don't think any of the other terrain pieces I've actually even wanted to do that.
Well, none of them have been this cheap. Like, they just immediately off the bat is, for what you get, is it worth it? I mean, the Hammerfall Bunker is... Yeah, I mean, the problem is the amount of terrain already on the board for that. I mean, you're just going to struggle to put it in a position where it's going to have any effect on the game, and it's like 220 points.
Yeah, so
super cheap and pretty durable.
Yeah, it's cheap. It's got a weapon. It's not a particularly good weapon. It's only range 6, but it's got a weapon, which means it can, if people do come and try and tag it up, it can do a little bit of damage. Also hit essentially a 2d6 flame. It has a contagion range aura, and it can have a light cover aura as well. All of these are sort of pretty solid things to have, especially at T8 12 wounds.
But it doesn't have Disgustingly Resilient.
It does have Disgustingly Resilient.
It does?
Yes.
Where? Oh, yes, sorry, I'm looking in completely the wrong place. Oh, it does. Oh, awesome.
Yeah.
It's the fact you can deploy it up the board as well. That's...
Yeah. It's... Yeah, I think actually the two best terrain pieces are this and the Nurgle Demon's Tree, which is actually pretty solid if you can find a way to... Well, if you can... if you could start that upfield, it would be very good. So yeah, this is... Probably doesn't make the cut over, say, an additional 14 Poxwalkers or so. But if you wanted to start this upfield and then deep strike a bunch of Terminators on it for a 1-up save, I don't think anyone would laugh at you.
No, I suppose the only problem is if you put it anywhere near an objective, because its close combat abilities are 0, something that wants to just hold that objective can just tag it, and it's not good enough to ever get rid of them anytime soon. So, and if they tag it, you can't shoot them. So
I think that's probably the biggest point against it. You want it sort of upfield, but not upfield enough that they can charge it first turn.
Yeah. And can buildings even hold objectives? I didn't...
Fortifications can't.
No.
So, finally, a model that has caused no end of debate amongst the internet, Mortarion. And he's just a beast. He is slightly weaker in terms of his damage output, but not by a lot, and he is massively, massively tougher. And I love what they've done with him.
Yeah, I mean, on the damage output point, I actually think if you're using his big attack, his damage output has gone up because it's now D3+3. whereas it was D6 before, wasn't it? It's the Reaping Scythe where it's gone down a bit, just because, and it's specifically against Imperium. So, and he has more base attacks. So with that Reaping Scythe, he's now got 21 attacks, which is crazy. And even 7 attacks from the Eviscerating Blow. If you're putting that into a knight, you are
you're killing it.
You're killing
or
it.
You're maiming it to such an extent that.
Yeah.
But I'm pretty sure mathematically you kill it more often than not if you're giving himself the rerolls, because you're hitting on 2s, winning on 2s, no saves.
And you're re-rolling hits and wounds because it's a plague weapon.
So that's 7, 14. Yeah, it's about 28 damage on average to a knight, probably a little lower once he's counted the old reroll 1 into a 1. But yeah. And the fact that he's got 3 Warlord traits, and you can choose a Warlord trait, which I don't think any other named character has at the moment. And it's just a great ability, because that was always the biggest disadvantage of having a named character. They come with a Warlord trait, a lot of them you don't want to take.
And that Warlord trait has to be one of the Plague Company contagions, doesn't it? So, like we've mentioned, there are a couple that are super, super strong, and you combine that with what he's capable of. He is a wrecking machine.
Yeah, I also like the fact that he does have to be the Warlord. You can't have Mortarion and have him not be the Warlord unless you have another model with the same rule. And given the rule is called Demon Primarch, that probably means that Magnus is going to have the same thing. And if you have a Magnus and Mortilis, you can fight amongst themselves, whoever's the Warlord.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
But yeah, he's a monster. He's massively tough, and he might change the meta by himself.
Yeah, I am hype for getting him on the table and seeing what he can do. Yeah, I'm super excited.
I'm going to take a prediction, which might horribly backfire. I think Mortarion will end up being better in a list with demons than with Death Guard.
Yes, but
because I think combining him with a bunch of greater Slaanesh demons might end up being a more powerful list than having the Death Guard support. But I think he's going to be super powerful in both.
But then he loses his contagion, so is that...
He loses the -1 toughness, but I don't think he loses anything else.
Oh, so he keeps his host of plagues.
I believe so. That doesn't say anything about him being having him to be in a pure detachment. I might be wrong on that. There may be something in the contagions rule where you only get it there, but I think, having checked the book a couple of times, that only affects the -1 toughness one. Because losing the you can't re-roll against him or as one of the Warlord traits would be a noticeable blow to him.
Yes.
But yeah, that's my slightly out there prediction. But yeah, he's great. He isn't indestructible, no matter what people might say on the internet. And you either want lots of probably D6 damage weaponry or damage 1 weaponry, because he pretty much laughs at damage 2 weaponry.
Poison's interesting, just because it doesn't matter that he's tougher or that he ignores 1 point of damage down to 1. So that poison has exactly the same effect in him. Problem is, you still need to chuck an absolute bucket load of shots into him. Yeah, so lists that I can see doing well against him would be Jakari, because of that poison spam they can have, if you want to go that way. But Jakari in a poor spot pre-codex. Sisters of Battle, I played against them with multi-models, is still horrendously nasty. And finally, I think Admech, because they've got just their Castellan robots put out a bajillion shots, and they still got Wrath of Mars to chuck mortal wounds on top of those bajillion shots. Yeah. But even for those things, none of those is a trivial way to kill him. No. And I don't think you're guaranteed. No. It is interesting. A lot of the comparisons that I've seen against him, people say, the Nightbringer doesn't kill him on average. And I'm like, the Nightbringer's 350 or so points, maybe 380, 370 now.
Morty's 500.
Yeah.
Do bear that in mind. If you're worried about Mortarion, do bear in mind that if you're a Marine player, for example, and you transhuman a Intercessor squad, he doesn't actually kill them. You don't have to kill Mortarion to win the games. And you may be better off not doing that. But yeah, he is a monster, and if I was facing him, I probably wouldn't be quite so buoyant about facing him.
Yeah. But then, he's what he should have always been. Like, the fact that he was so easily killed by turn 2 in 95% of matchups, it was kind of like, what's the point? You're spending so many points on this, and it's just getting annihilated.
Yeah.
I think I played you Death Guards with your Elder, and he just got evaporated.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I killed him. I think I killed him at the start of turn 2. I think he was technically still alive at turn 1. And that was with a -1 to hit. And I can't. Was that a vibro cannon list?
No,
before or after?
It was big blob of bikes, which I did do the grenade bomb combo on, which was quite cool. Lots of Wraith
Units.
Couple of the Psycho Wraith Lords. Can't remember what they're called. Wraith Seers, is it?
Yes.
And Fire Prisons.
Yeah, that is not even like the most shooty army in the world. Fire Prisms rerolling is pretty solid. The Wraith Seers could do some pretty good damage to Mortarion as well. But that's by like no means a top tier shooting list. That's kind of a more mid-rangey list.
Yeah.
Especially by Eldar standards. And if that's killing him in almost a turn, then a lot of other things were killing him much quicker. Yeah, so anything else you want to go back on over any of the stuff we've covered?
No, I don't think so. I mean, 1,000,001 list ideas going around in my head. But,
what's the favourite one you've got so far?
Well, probably the most balanced one is probably a variation of one I've seen a few people run. It's not quite the same. It's a bit different. It is Mortarion, obviously, and then a battalion detachment with a Lord of Contagion, with Plague Reaper, so he's as cheap as possible, a Malignant Plague Caster, and then 3 units of 5 Plague Marines with a flail in each, 2 units of 10 Poxwalkers, 5 Blight Lord Terminators, 1 with a Blight Launcher, 1 with a flail, so that, and 2 units of those, a 5-man Death Shroud unit with the Chimes of Contagion, additional Plague Spurt Book Gauntlet, just because I had points really, and then a Plague Surgeon with the Vigorius's Helm, and then the Foul Blight Spawn with the Foul Blight Spawn Relic. And I also popped, because I had 10 points left over, I popped on Viscous Death on him so he can reroll a number of shots from his splurter. So that feels like a reasonably balanced list around Mortarion. There is another one I did for a bit of fun, which is basically because I've got about 45 Plague Marines. So it's a list with 40 Plague Marines and 15 Terminators, and a Lord of Contagion, Malignant Plague Caster. And the Plague Marines are variously either tooled up for combat or shooting. But I think that first one is more. It's a more sensible one. There is a variation on the sort of all Plague Marine list that I mentioned, where you swap one of the 10-man Plague Marine squads for a couple of Bloat drones with flesh mowers. Again, not sold on that. You could go all demon engines.
I don't think you want to go all demon engines with this one. It's the one build I think they've kind of got rid of. I think having a couple adds a really good thing to the sort of infantry corps. But I don't think you were seeing some lists that were like, I'll run maximum Plague Burst Crawlers and then as many of the Blight haulers as you
Yeah.
could get away with, and I don't think that is something you'll see in Death Guard anymore.
Right.
You'll see a
Blight
couple.
too expensive, yeah. Just not worth it.
But just as a point of comparison, the list actually I found I preferred so far is a multi-less list. So it's got a Demon Prince without wings with a sword, a Plaguecaster, 3 Poxwalker squads, 2 Blight Lord Terminator squads, 1 with a flail, both 5-man, a 5-man and a 4-man Death Shroud unit, a Putrefier, a Blightspawn, 2 Bloat drones with the Flesh Mowers to contest those sort of mid-board objectives early, and then 2 Plague Burst Crawlers with the Entropy Cannons to sit at the back and plonk away at stuff.
Interesting.
And that was a ferryman list so that you could have the 12-inch you don't count as charging, and it just aims to get to the mid-board and take whatever gets thrown at it. But yeah, I think whether you have Mortarion or whether you don't, Death Guard are real hard as nails now, as they should be.
Yeah.
And it's going to be interesting to see whether you end up with just a pure bodies approach, because Plague Marines are just very tough to kill and have loads of them with OBSEC. Whether you go a Terminator heavy route, whether you go Morty and Friends route, or even Morty and other Chaos Soup bits. Death Guard have looked, I think, as interesting as they've ever looked. And I think there's just so much win in this book. Even if the first time I looked at it, I'll admit, I was very down on it until I sort of actually start playing around with things.
Yeah, I think it's the flexibility now. It's not just take 3 Plague Burst Crawlers, take the 4 up in Bun Relic, and there are so many different ways to build. You can go, and I love that Terminators are playable because they're just such cool models.
Oh yeah,
especially the Shroud. They are baller.
Yeah, and I think even something like Cultists, which are probably the weakest unit in the book, well, probably Land Raiders actually, but even Cultists, they're a little bit cheaper now, so you wouldn't feel terrible running them. Don't think you would want to, but yeah, I like the fact that almost everything in the book feels like it's got a place in there, which certainly wasn't the case before.
Yeah, but with Cultists, like when Poxwalkers are fearless.
Yeah. Basically, if you want to go really hard on banners, you've got a reason to take Cultists. I think that's about it.
Maybe. Still not convinced.
No, I'm not either. But I think the fact that you could just about make that debate is a good sign.
Yes.
Yeah. And the fact that Cultists are now cheaper than Guardsmen is something that pleases me, even if I do play Guard.
They're worse than Guardsmen. They've got a worse save. They're not core.
And they're not upset. You can't double move them.
Precisely.
But yeah. Anything else before we wrap up?
No, I don't think so. I'm just getting on with painting so that when we are eventually allowed to see each other, we can have a jolly good game with some really nicely painted armies.
Yeah, although I don't want to particularly do a Death Guard mirror match.
No. It'd be like end the game and both people have still got most of their army.
Yeah. I've been enjoying playing a little bit of Chaos Space Marine vanilla again, and realizing how terrible their profiles are, but how good some of their strats are.
Well, I suspect some of those are going to get.
Oh yeah. But if Chaos Space Marines get the Death Guard treatment when their book comes out, I will be a very happy man. And I didn't think I'd say that when some of the strats started leaking, and I was like, "What? What have they done to all my beloved combos?"
Yes, we await that with bated breath. I mean, the most interesting thing will be, will they put Chaos Space Marine Codex out before they put Thousand Suns out? And then if they put Thousand Suns out beforehand, does that indicate that maybe there might be some other, more interesting Chaos Space Marine Codexes or related codexes around the corner at some point?
Yeah, Emperor's Children or World Eaters or something like that. Emperor Children have been rumored for a long time. I'd hope they spend a little longer on the Thousand Suns one, just because that feels very dated, even by the standard of Chaos Space Marine things.
Yeah.
And them having a couple more new toys would be nice, but that's another debate for another day.
Absolutely.
Cool. Well, thanks very much for joining me.
No problem at all.
And thank you for listening, whoever you are. Bye.
Bye.